Hey gang, using the promo code MTGMudsta, one word, all caps, will get you 10% off orders of $10 or more at Flipside Gaming, Original Magic Art, and orders of singles at Multizone. If they don't have what you're looking for, you could check out TCG Player and use my affiliate link to help support the channel. Looking for a way to bling out your deck and not spend a fortune? Alter Sleaze can help with that, and you can help with the channel at the same time by using my affiliate link. Or, if you're looking to join the Goblin Gang, you can always support me through Patreon. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game is a bit of an older one, and I'm playing my Titania deck. I keep Avenger of Zendikar, Ghost Quarter, Crop Rotation, Sylvan Library, Food Chain, Terrastodon, and a Snow-Covered Forest. Max is playing his Derevi deck, keeping an Adorned Pouncer, Soul Ring, Growing Ranks, Gavany Township, Forest, Plains, and Breeding Pool. Martin is playing his Dakkon Blackblade, keeping Supreme Verdict, Arcane Sanctum, Storm Cauldron, Expedition Map, Knight of the White Orchid, Watery Grave, and Druidic Satchel. New to the channel is Neil, playing his Ezuri deck, keeping Thornwood Falls, Whispersilk Cloak, Beast Within, 2 Islands, Simic Guildgate, and a Simic Signet. Neil wins the die roll and starts us off. He plays a tapped Thornwood Falls, which comes in and gains him 1. I play a Snow-Covered Forest. Martin plays a tapped Arcane Sanctum. Max's turn has him playing a tapped Breeding Pool before passing back to Neil. Neil plays a tapped Simic Guildgate. I play a Ghost Quarter and cast Soul Ring. I then tap the Soul Ring and the Snow-Covered Forest for a Sylvan Library, passing. Martin plays a tapped Watery Grave and casts Expedition Map. Max plays a Plains and casts his own Soul Ring. He then plays out an Adorned Pouncer, passing. Neil plays an Island and casts one of my favorite Simic cards, Trigon Predator. On my turn, I use my library but don't keep any extras. I then unfortunately have to pass. Martin draws and activates his map. He announces he's going to go find a land to play it and passes to Max. Max plays a forest and swings at me. I declare no blocks, and before damage is dealt, Max cheats out Derevi, activating the Bird Wizard's ability. I then get hit twice from the double strike for 1, and Max gets to untap 2 permanents. In his second main phase, he casts a Soul Foundry, and as it enters, exiles Progenitor Mimic under it. Neil draws and plays another island. He then goes at me, and I take 2 from the Trigon Predator, and Neil gets to blow up my Sylvan Library. In his second main phase, he plays a Skyshroud Claim and passes while searching. My turn has me drawing and then casting an Elvish Mystic before passing to Martin. Martin plays Knight of the White Orchid and goes to find a Tundra putting to the field. He then casts a Thematic Compass and passes to Max. Max plays Gavany Township as his land for turn, and goes at Neil with the Adorned Pouncer and Derevi at me. He responds to his untaps by tapping his mana and activates the Foundry to make a token copy of the Progenitor Mimic. He has it come in as a copy of the Trigon Predator. He then untaps 3 permanents, and in his second main phase, is able to cast a Growing Ranks before passing to Neil. Neil draws and plays a Simic Signet. He then plays a Whispersilk Cloak and gears up the Trigon. He swings it at Max, dealing 2 and blowing up the Foundry. I draw and seem to have missed the idea that we play lands in EDH, especially in a land-based deck. I then cast a Wayward Swordtooth because what's better than not playing 1 land, while obviously not playing 2. Martin plays an Academy Ruins, and he casts Druidic Satchel. He then passes to Max. Max plays a tapped Irrigated Farmland, and remembers to populate on his upkeep, making another token copy of the Trigon Predator. He then activates his Township to give his board a +1/+1 counter onto each creature. The first Trigon token goes at Neil, the Pouncer heads at me, and Derevi goes at Martin. We then all take the hits, and Max blows up Neil's Cloak, and then untaps 4 permanents. He passes, and at the end of turn, I cast a Crop Rotation and sacrifice my Snow-Covered Forest. I grab a Windswept Heath, and then crack that, losing 1 life to go find a Snow-Covered Forest. Neil plays a tapped Oran Reef the Vastwood, and plays Rishkar. As the elf enters, he puts a +1/+1 counter onto the predator and one onto Rishkar itself, and then passes turn. I draw and have enough to cast Titania, who enters and brings back my Windswept Heath. I then pass to Martin. Martin activates his satchel at the end of turn and reveals a creature off the top, making a sapling token. Martin draws for turn and plays a Plains. He casts Supreme Verdict, and before that resolves, Neil plays Beast Within to blow up the growing ranks. This has Max making a beast token, which is then wiped out as the board wipe resolves. Martin then plays a Weathered Wayfarer, and at the end of turn, Max cheats out Derevi once more. Max plays an island and pays 6 mana for Elspeth, Sun's Champion, and Max upticks her to make 3 soldier tokens, and then heads to combat. He hits Martin with Derevi, and untaps a permanent from dealing damage, then passes turn. Neil casts Ezuri in his main phase, and then brings out Eternal Witness. This lets him return to hand the cloak, and he gains an experience counter. And then once that's done, activates the Oran Reef to give the creatures that came into play this turn a +1/+1 counter. Moving to combat, Neil gets his Ezuri trigger, and puts the +1/+1 counter onto the Witness before passing to me. I draw and cast a Reap and Sow, I go and grab a land, putting to field a tapped Myriad Landscape before passing to Martin. Martin's upkeep has him activating the Wayfarer to find and put to hand an Urborg. He then responds before leaving the phase by using Academy Ruins to put his Expedition map on top of his library to draw it for turn. He then plays the Urborg for turn and casts the map. He then passes, and at the end of turn, transforms his Compass into Spires of Vraska. Max plays a tap Thawing Glaciers and then upticks Elspeth. This has him making 3 more soldier tokens. Moving to combat, Neil gets to see Derevi, while Martin gets to meet 3 new soldiers. They take their lumps, and with the 4 untapped triggers, Max puts them all into his Thawing Glaciers. He does this and activates it each time to go and find 3 basics, and then passes, putting to hand the Glaciers at the end of turn from his delayed trigger. Neil casts Unexpected Results, which is one of my other favorite Simic cards. He shuffles up his library, and then reveals off the top Prime Speaker Zagana, who comes in. She comes in with a counter sadly, so no experience counters for Ezuri, but she does see the beefy Eternal Witness, and draws 5 cards. Max mentions that if Neil uses the Oran Reef before he draws, he'd be able to draw an extra card, so he let him do that. Neil then plays a Forest from his hand, and he casts a Fertilid, gaining another experience counter, and then gives it even more counters as he moves to combat and then passes turn. I draw and pass. Martin uses his Wayfarer in his upkeep and reveals Hall the Bandit Lord. He then plays a Cabal Coffers for turn and activates it for a lot of black mana. He first activates the Satchel and hits a Plains off the top, putting it into play. Martin then uses some of that black mana for a Herald of Lashark. Martin then puts to stack Storm Cauldron, and with it, I use my Myriad Landscape to go and find 2 basics, while Max uses his Gavany Township to pump his board with +1/+1 counters. Max untaps for turn and draws. He plays the tap Thawing Glaciers, and then upticks Elspeth, making 3 more soldiers. He then passes to Neil. Neil plays a Whispersilk Cloak, and bounces the lands he tapped, and then gears up Zagana with the cloak. He then moves to combat, putting the counters onto the Fertilid, and Zagana puts Elspeth down to 1 loyalty. He then passes, having to discard down to 7 because of the lands that were bounced back to his hand. I tap some mana, bouncing them to hand, and cast Nissa Vital Force. I then play 2 lands from my hand because of and thanks to Storm Cauldron. I cast a Burgeoning, and then untap a land with Nissa, passing to Martin. Martin's upkeep has him gaining a Herald trigger. Responding to this, Max taps his lands for mana to activate his Gavany Township and bounces a land tapped back to his hand. Martin still gets to take a land, and it's Max's Breeding Pool. Martin then taps a land for mana and returns it to hand as he activates the Wayfarer, and goes to find a land for his hand. He reveals a Rogue's Passage and plays it. This lets me play out a Snow-Covered Forest from my hand. He then activates the Coffers, returning 2 lands to hand and making tons of black mana, and he makes a blue, a white, and a colorless from the Hall, which has him losing 3, to cast Dakkon Blackblade. His commander is Haste, and Martin plays a command tower as well. He then makes him unblockable with the passage using the floating black mana, and he goes to combat, hitting Max for 6 and passing. Max draws and makes soldiers with Elspeth. He goes all out at Martin, and Martin activates the Spires to untap Derevi and remove them from combat, and then blocks one of the smaller soldier tokens with a Herald. Max then cycles his irrigated farmland to draw a card, and Martin gets knocked down to 7. Max gets a bunch of untaps, which he does after playing a forest, and a breeding pool untapped, taking 2. He then casts Anointed Procession, bouncing lands back to his hand, and passes to Neil. Neil draws and plays 2 lands, a forest and an island. He casts a Patagia Viper, which comes in, making 2 1/1 snake tokens. He then plays a Wood Elves and gets another experience counter, and then goes to find a forest card. He then taps 2 more lands to find another basic with a Fertilid, and is bouncing a lot of lands back to hand thanks to the Storm Cauldron. Moving to combat, he's sad he can't put the counters from Ezuri onto Zagana, and he puts them onto the Viper instead. He then hits Max with Zagana for 6, and passes to me. I draw, and downtick Nissa, getting her emblem, which lets me draw a card whenever I play a land. I then tap 7 to recast Titania, and as she enters, I bring back a Windswept Heath, while my lands go to hand. I then play 2 lands from hand, and draw from them, and pass, discarding down to 7. Martin steals another land on his upkeep with the Herald, and replays the Urborg and the Coffers, which lets me play some lands from hand. I draw as those lands come in, and I lose 1 life cracking my Heath, while Martin uses the Coffers to make a lot of black mana. He once more makes his commander unblockable with Rogue's Passage, and then activates the Satchel, revealing a creature off the top and making a token. He hits Max again, this time for 7 commander damage, and then taps some more lands in his post-combat main phase. He drops a Rescos Explorer, but only gets to go and find 1 Plains card. He reveals a Godless Shrine, passing. At the end of turn, Max uses Thawing Glaciers to go and find a basic. Max uses Elspeth to make 6 soldiers this time around because of the procession. He swings lots at Martin and I, and before moving to blocks, I use Goth Quarter on one of my own lands. This makes me 2 tokens as I go to find a snow-covered forest and put it to field. I draw as it enters after I'm done shuffling. Martin then blocks what he can, and uses Spires on one of the attacking creatures. I block what I can too, and once that's all done, Max uses his townships to give his board another round of +1/+1 counters. Martin then takes 4, while I take 11. Max also gets some untap triggers, and does it like so. Neil untaps and plays a forest and an island. This lets me play 2 lands, and I draw 2 more cards from the emblem as I do. Neil then moves a cloak onto his Fertilid, which he does change to the Viper after a second. He then adds the counters to Zagana, and goes to swing at Max, who just takes the hit. He then passes, and at the end of turn, I crack my Evolving Wilds, finding a basic, shuffling, and then drawing a card. I draw for turn, and play a Command Beacon and Jund Panorama. I played a Food Chain, which is a combo piece between Titania, the Beacon, and the enchantment. I'll go over the combo in the end section, but basically allows me to make nearly infinite green mana for creatures, nearly infinite tokens, and as a bonus, draws my whole library because the emblem is out. I'm then able to cast Concordant Crossroads after I draw it, followed by a Craterhoof Behemoth to finish the table, and the gang scoops it up. Game review time. So let's go over the Titania Food Chain Command Beacon combo just quick for the viewers who don't know how it works. Step 1 is you sacrifice Command Beacon and get the trigger for 5/3 Elemental and the Beacon going on the stack. With these on the stack, you then exile Titania to Food Chain and get the mana that can only be used on creature spells. You then have Titania go to the command zone and resolve the Command Beacon trigger, putting it to your hand. You're then able to cast her with that mana from Food Chain, and as she comes in, you bring back the Command Beacon. You can repeat this over and over again, netting you infinite mana for creatures and infinite elemental tokens. This worked even better since I had the Nissa emblem that allowed me to draw a card every time a land came in, and effectively allowed me to draw my library while getting all these infinites. I was then able to use Concordant Crossroads to give the tokens haste and win the game. I don't feel bad for using the combo, not just because I won, but also because everyone was getting to the point where everyone else was very scary. Martin's commander was almost big enough to take out Max and I, while Max's board was certainly large enough to take everyone else out. Neil's board, while not as big as Max's with his tokens, and not as scary as Martin's with his commander, certainly was going to be doing a lot of damage with the unblockable Whispersoul Cloak. I saw a chance, and I went for it, and it paid off in this case. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.